Mark, Jaynes, and Anders Krohn.
It was going the right direction.
15, 10, 5, 4, 3,
I didn't ask him for his ID or anything.
Welcome to the Autosportradio.com 2018 show. I'm your host, Don Kay. We are live from McGillivray Speedway at 30th and High School in the beautiful town of Speedway, Indiana, home of Little Rush, actually. Tonight's show is presented by Honda and Honda HPD, IMS Motor Speedway, the Verizon IndyCar Series, and SVRA. A couple of things to mention before we get rocking and rolling. I seem to have invented trouble with a computer because I'm on the phone constantly with Jack at Computer Overdrive. If you have a problem, this guy, trust me, can fix it. Give him a call, tell him your problem. They have they're home of the free computer check. They'll tell you what's the matter, what it takes fixing. You can reach them at 317-328-0766. And coming on November the 5th will be the Hoosier Thunder. Indiana Short Track Heritage will be midget sprints. Silver Crown cars will be on display at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It starts the 5th and it runs until April 21st. If you are wanting to keep up with what's going on in the world of motorsports, you've got to go to tracksideonline.com and subscribe. It's a great service, and they'll tell you everything that's going on. All of the teams are still sending out emails and information, so if you want to know what's going on, go to tracksideonline.com and subscribe. The owners of the Grand King Race Shop, Bill and Fluffy, have a deal for you. You can take a tour of race shops, a museum. You can tour Grand King's rebuild shop. It's cleaner now than it ever was when I knew about it. But they take you on a tour of some shops, and you can make an appointment. Their car will handle 6 to 8 people. They'll pick you up and drop you off from once you started. Their office number is 317-820-3595. And I don't know if anybody is aware, but I'm going to tell you, Honda won 4 SCCA National Championship this past week at Laguna Seca. And I just heard that Fuzzies has left Ed Carpenter Racing. I wasn't aware of that. I just heard that. Next week, my scheduled guests are the president and CEO of Hulman & Company, which includes the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and IndyCar, Mr. Mark Miles, and joining him the second half of the program will be the Director of Marketing Communications for IndyCar and Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Mr. C.J. O'Donnell. The next speakers, end of the year. The next speaker series event will be at the Grand King Shops on November the 10th. And it's a good thing they're here because I'd have had the door packed with people and nobody there. It'll be the 17th. I got to change that because she didn't come up and tell me naturally. So, and Gary Irwin will be one of the guests, and he's funny. He's funny. You want to see him, and if you need cinder blocks, too bad, he sold the business. And if you are interested in the Grand King history, you can see the interviews with 51 hours of drivers and members of his crew and so forth. You can just go to youtube.com and put in Grand King Racing and you'll see it, and then subscribe to it. It doesn't cost you anything, but once you subscribe, when they change the program every week, you can be advised of it. Now, my first guest is a gentleman that I have had the pleasure of knowing, although I won't embarrass him because we're not real close pals, but I've known him since he got here, and I think in 1982. He's always been straightforward. Whenever I've wanted to talk to him about anything, he's always been willing to talk, never dodged me at all. And I have to say, he's probably as friendly a guy as I know in the motorsports, and you have a question, he'll answer it. And I'm wearing the pin that he gave me in May, and it's going to be worth a lot of money at some point. He is a graduate of the lower grades of racing in Europe. He was so good that he very quickly got into Formula One and had a pretty decent career there, and came over to America to take America by storm, and apparently that got him in trouble. But he's here tonight, and I'm going to find out about it. Please welcome Mr. Derek Daly.
Thank you.
You know, you and I aren't close friends, but if I ask
We're
you
not even friends at all.
probably after tonight, we might not be. I don't know. But, you know, when you came over, I talked to you several times about, you know, leaving Formula One, coming here, da-da-da-da-da, and you always were friendly, always talking. And I've known you since about 82, and I have to tell you, I have never, ever heard you say hell or damn. I've never heard you say anything, nothing. But somehow, something went amiss. And what's happened has happened. You lost your job at Channel 8, and a lot of people said, that's it. And I won't watch Channel 8 except if Megan McEwen happens to be on the sports. I'll watch that. But otherwise, I don't watch. What have you heard? What have people said to you over this situation?
So a lot's happened, obviously, since I was here last. You're all familiar with the fallout. Let me just backtrack a little bit, because people ask me, you know, how could this happen? You know, is the world gone mad? You know, what's the statutes of limitations on how far back he can reach to somebody said something 35 years ago? And so I actually thought I got terminated for something I said 35 years ago. It turns out when I backtracked and got the full story, I was actually terminated by Channel 8 because they thought I said what Bob Lamey said. In fact, by the time they found out I didn't say it, they offered to retract the story, but it was too late. The damage is already done. And so 35 years ago, so to fill the rest of the story in, I don't know who knows what I actually did say, but let me just tell you what I did say 35 years ago. And there's so many ironies, because the interesting thing is 2 or 3 days after I said what I said 35 years ago, my television career started, because I met a guy called Tom Carnegie, who was as big a legend as there is in the city here, who, you know, I think he had an affinity for the European people, and he asked me to do a bit of an interview one day on Channel 6, and he comes back and does another one the next day, and he said, would you be my color analyst, my driver analyst for the month of May? I didn't even know what that meant. And of course I said yes, and suddenly I'm now on television every night from the Speedway, and that was really the start of my television career. But during qualifying, I was interviewed by Larry Henry, a guy from Detroit, who some of you might be familiar with. He was on the radio broadcast for years. And so he's talking about, you know, everything's different for you now. You know, you're in America, different country, different team, different series. And so I'm paraphrasing slightly because I don't know the exact words. And I said, yeah, you know, I'm now a race in America, American series, American team, American sponsor. If things don't go right, the only N in the woodpile will be me. Now understand, that was a common Irish colloquialism that's still used today, believe it or not. Not as frequently today, but in English-speaking countries, that phrase was used to describe a variety of things, like I'd be the scapegoat, I'd be the odd man out, you know, I'd suffer the consequences, I'd be the difficult one to deal with. So it was a phrase that was self-deprecating against me, myself. I'm saying if things don't go right, I'll be the one to shoulder the blame. It'll fall on me, you know, so self-deprecating. Now, the interview ended, and Robin Miller says to me, he says, hey, you can't say that word here. I said, what word? You know, the N word. Because remember, when it's self-deprecating against me, it was not considered a racial slur where I came from. We didn't have any black people where I came from. In English-speaking countries, it was a turn of phrase or a colloquialism that was never intended and was never used as a racial slur. So, Robin Miller tells me that. I understand. And as you said, I don't swear. I don't curse in general. And so from then on, for 35 years, I've never used the word, right? Roll on 35 years. Bob Lamey is at the Colts training camp in Westfield, and he's asked by Big Joe Stasiak, who you know, and he's doing an interview, and while they're in commercial, Stasiak says, "What's some of the wildest things you've ever heard on the radio?" Lamey turns to the black female engineer and says, "Are the microphones off?" Which she apparently said, yes. I don't know this for a fact. I'm just relaying what I was told. And so Lamey begins to try and recall what he thinks he heard 35 years ago and what he thinks a driver said 35 years ago. Of course, he got it completely wrong, and he embellished it greatly for effect on the day. And of course, the black female engineer heard it, was offended by it, as she should, with what he said, as she should. She goes to the HR department of MS Broadcasting, WIBC, makes a complaint. WIBC goes to the Colts and says, "Hey, you need to be aware of what's going on here." The Colts say to Lamey, "You need to retire immediately," which he did, right? Now, here's where it got really murky and bad for me. What Lamey said was that he interviewed a driver, which was inaccurate, intimated that it was Derek Daly. He said what the question was, does anybody hold back their speed at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway? Does anybody hold back during qualifying? And then he intimated that the driver, me, said, there aren't any ends in this race. That is a brutal racial slur. I understand completely why this engineer went to MS Broadcasting and how it got to the Colts. The problem was when the Colts told Lamey to retire, he agreed. They celebrated his career. He went out on a golden chair, if you like,
Krohn.
lauded for everything he did, and he did great things for the Colts and for the city. However, the female engineer took exception to the complaint and him being lauded and applauded for all he did when the real reason he retired was never given. So she goes, well, I don't know whether she went, somebody went to Channel 13 and said, hey, by the way, that story isn't true. The real truth is it was a racial slur. Channel 13 break that story and suddenly it explodes. Lamey is forced to retire because of a racial slur. The next day, word out on the street was, yeah, but do you know it was Derek Daly? What? It was? And so Channel 8 hears that I'm somehow connected to the backstory. Channel 8 were so scared that Channel 13 would beat them to the headline story. They were determined that if there was a story, they were going to get it out first. So they called me. They called me and said, did you hear about Lamey? Yeah, he retired. Because I remember a little flash coming across my phone 3 or 4 days earlier. He retired. No, but did you know there's a backstory to it that somehow has you involved? I said, no, I didn't. He said, yeah, somehow along an interview. I said, oh, no. I said, I think I might know what they might be trying to connect me to. So I told Channel 8 my interview because I wanted to protect them. I didn't want somebody going on the air talking about Channel 8's guy. So I said, no, here's my story. And I said, I'll actually send it to you. I sent it to them in writing. So they now knew what Lamey said. They had in writing the content and context of what I said. They knew none of them were connected, but they were so scared that Channel 13 was going to jump to the headline. They had to be first. And so they then tied it that slur came from me, right? And so they tell me, we're going to have to cut ties because of this incident. I'm thinking the incident 35 years ago. I'm in shock thinking, what? Have we gone mad? But I could do nothing about it. So we watched the headlines that night, and AC calls me and tells me, Brooke Martin, our anchor, will handle it with grace. I'm thinking they're going to handle with grace the fact that 35 years ago, I had an inadvertent interview with an Irish colloquialist and that got me fired. I'm thinking, how crazy is that? So We sit there, we watch the television news come on. I'm the headline story. I'm the blazing headline. There's Lamey and me, full screen. Brooke Martin comes on. The source of Lamey's offensive language was our racing analyst, Derek Daly. And what's more, he confirmed it to us before we went on the air. Complete, fabricated, fake news, inaccurate, wrong details. And we're watching, and we can't believe it. I'm in shock saying, that's not right. So I sent a text to Brooke Martin. I said, how could you possibly do this? I said, I sent you the information. You had the facts. I said, did you read the facts? Did you even see them? And she sent me back a text. She said, Derek, I'm sorry this happened, but we were told to read the script as provided to us by management. Now, the script by management did not correlate with the details that I provided management. And so it didn't matter at that stage. You know how fast the news travels these days? It went across the world, and everybody, including my family and Connor, became collateral damage for misinformation being used, where Wish TV connected me directly to Lamey's racial slur, which never came from me in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, I got somebody here. Are you there?
I'm here. Me and Theo leaving Hondo. We've been down at Hondo to see the Hondo Texas.
Turn it up a little bit.
So
I can't hear that one.
we just finished about a half an hour ago. We're heading back.
Yeah.
I don't know whether we can hear that, but one of the people who jumped to my defense immediately was Willie T. Ribbs.
And he's
I mean,
on,
Willie
he's
T.
on the
Ribbs,
phone right here.
He's on the phone now. Willie T. has been a friend of mine for 41 years. He arrived in England and nobody would talk to him. Nobody would give him the time of day. I befriended him.
A little fuzzy, but I can hear you.
Okay, and ironically, I had just been to his wedding 3 days earlier before the story broke. He jumped on the defense bandwagon on my behalf before I ever even spoke to him. He got onto the media and said, hey, this can't be right. This is Derek Daly. This is my friend. His quote was, he's more black than I am. I don't say that for effect, but I say that because don't call me a racist. So you see how the whole thing got out of hand, but but the damage was done. As soon as they connected me to Lamey's racial slur, the damage was done. The fact that it wasn't me and the content and context was nowhere close to what I did, it didn't matter because they were out there and had that lead story in that headline, and that headline went across the world. And my career stopped dead in its tracks. My television career was over. I did probably 25 or 30 corporate keynote speeches a year. Everything stopped dead. Bang. Because nobody could explain to them that the facts were wrong. And so, my life changed right there and then.
Are you listening to this?
Yes.
Do you agree with him?
Yes.
He said he's been friends with you for some 41 years.
That's correct. Derek was, when I got off the plane in England, in London, England, I didn't know any drivers. I didn't know anybody. And we met at Brands Hatch, and I had followed his career before I had got to England. And so I introduced myself, and he was like big brother from then on.
And do you believe that he said what he said?
Repeat that. What did he say again?
Do you believe that what he was accused of is something he actually said?
No, it was broken, but I got most of it.
Okay. My question is, do you believe that what Derek was accused of saying he actually said, or would even think of it?
Oh, that's not Derek, and that's not who he is, and maybe If the guy, if Landy was trying to get a piece of ass, he was doing it all the wrong way.
Well,
Okay, you know, and you know, he was trying to impress the brown sugar. Well, you know, that sugar got a little salty, and so, but you know, I guess, you know, with a name like Lady, he could say, you know, he could say some stupid stuff. So, but anyway, as far as Derek's concerned, we have been close for 41 years. He was at my wedding 2 months ago in Las Vegas, and he was my guy in England.
well,
And as a matter of fact, him and I whipped some ass in a parking lot one night in L.A.
well, as I said to him when we started this, I've known him since he got here in '82 and talked to him off and on, so forth. I've never heard him even say hell and damn. I've said it 4 times since we started. I've never heard him say it. Thanks for
No.
Thanks for calling, Willie.
Okay.
Appreciate your time.
Have
And tell Theo congratulations on his championship he was just in.
Yeah, he shot real well, and he beat me today a bird hunting though.
Right.
I don't like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Willie.
Well, have fun.
Yeah. Thanks. Talk to you.
All right, guys. I'm like
C-
cool, baby.
As you can see, Don Kay has all the high-tech equipment
Oh,
here.
hey.
But it was just ironic that I'd just been to his wedding and all this broke out. But here's the thing. You know, we live in a world where I know social media means we have to be careful about what we do, but unfortunately, we don't live we do live in a world where you are now guilty and not innocent. Due process has now gone from the world that we live in, which should be scary for everybody here, because the laws of this great country is you're innocent until proven guilty. There was no due process. It would have been so easy for Wish TV to just call one person that was no more than 2 miles down the road to say, did Daly say this? It would have been easy for them to say, did you say this? But you see how this got out of hand? But it got out of hand because 2 out-of-state managers came in to run Wish. They didn't care about me or us or this city. They were only driven by headlines and ratings. And if they got beaten to the headline by Channel 13, who, by the way, researched the story, was there another story connecting me, and realized there was no additional story to it. And so, just for the sake of doing a professional job and due diligence on what was probably the largest sports/news story in this city in the last 15 years, myself and Lamy get fired, 15 or 20 years. But just doing competent due diligence would have kept me out of this completely. And then the collateral damage, of course, was Connor, because, you know, it would have stayed maybe within 465, you know, for that weekend. But then Lily heard the Wish TV story, and rightly so. They thought there might be even worse headlines coming. So they ran scared, and so suddenly Connor became toxic. When a major company like Lily says, "Oh, we want to, you know, pull our brand in." So you see the ripple effect and the collateral damage that happened, you know, all because of something Lamy tried to recall that he thinks he heard 35 years ago, and then he embellished it to great effect to Big Joe Stasiak.
And Connor has been here, and he said,
I think Lamy owes me an apology, by the way. He owes me a friggin' apology.
publicly.
Yes, he does.
Publicly.
Just say, Daly never said that. It was a mistake.
I never
Yeah,
heard.
at least then I could say, well, thank you.
So now this has affected your speaking as well?
Oh, it's over. I had all the events canceled immediately. Because remember, I was represented by some of the biggest speaking bureaus in the country. Now, when a speaking bureau sends out to a client, here's a possible speaker we think you should consider, what do? They Google me immediately. The only headlines that come up is racial slur, Daly denies, and the whole story. But the story is based on the initial headline story, which was incorrect. It was Bob Kravitz from Channel 13 who did the research and got the story right and said, this isn't right. He got hosed in all of this. He did the research on the colloquialism of that phrase, where it came from, and how it's used still today. And so if Wish had just done that, this would never have happened to me. But let it be a lesson for anybody to understand, how things can get out of hand. But I just hope that journalism can come back to the strength that it had in years past, because this insatiable need to grab the headline is causing more damage and actually losing credibility for the journalists rather than building credibility, because so many of these stories are fake, factually incorrect stories.
And social media is probably the biggest one. I mean, stuff comes out and you go, where in the world did this come from? And of course, a lot of people believe if it's on the internet, it's got to be true.
And that is unfortunate.
Oh, yeah.
That is the way. Yeah, but I mean, I think we all have to keep it in perspective. And I've said it many, many times since this whole thing happened with me. I understand how it happened. However, I'd like to right the wrong somehow. But if this happened 10 years ago to me, I probably would have been much more devastating. I'm at a time in my career where I can understand it and deal with it and work through it. But I think everybody understands when I say this. I don't have a terminal illness, and I'm not dealing with what Robert Wickens is dealing with right now. So when you keep that in perspective, I think we can all begin to understand our health ultimately means a lot more to us, and we'll all get by. I've had big moments in my life, whether they are accidents or whatever. I've had a lot of things happen, and we all have during our years. But I think a big picture look at it has helped me immensely all through the years.
Well, as I've said before, I met you when you first came here, and I've never heard anything disparaging from you about anything, about anybody. Even if you didn't like what they did, you didn't tear them apart. You said, well, here it is. This is, you decide.
Right, and remember, I had a platform, as your next guest, Anders Krohn, does. We have a platform on television to almost say whatever you want. But you understand that when you're in a profession, you want to build the sport and build a profession. Yes, you want to have an opinion so you don't become a shrill to just say what they think you should say. And so I've tried to walk that fine line. And a lot of people didn't like what I had to say. But that's okay, because I would say to them, did I say something that was factually incorrect or something you didn't like? If it was factually incorrect, I apologize and I'll correct it on the air. But if it's just something you didn't like, sorry,
That's right. That's what you're there for, to report.
Yeah.
You're not there to make up stories. You're there to report. Is it likely, hopefully, that you will get back on television somewhere or radio? Or?
I don't know. I don't know, and I'm really not. I'm not looking at that right now. If I don't, I've had 24 years of such fun and enjoyment with access to everything I ever wanted to have access to. So if I do it again, great. If I don't, that's fine too. There's something that niggles inside me and maybe inside people in general. You always like to go out on your own terms. To be forced out with something like this, when the truth was never looked at. That's a sort of a niggle that sits there. And amazingly, of all people, Anthony Calhoun, a black guy who I worked with for 20 years, sat beside him for 20 years, who also never heard me ever say anything wrong. I often question, and Barbara and I would ask, questions. How come he never said, "Are you sure? This is Derek. This is our guy. We've never heard anything like this." I was just sort of disappointed that question never came up during this, tumultuous time of the blazing story. We have to get it out. There had to have been a bit of logic somehow, I hoped, applied to, understanding the story. So, I mean, I felt betrayed. I felt betrayed by Wish.
Justifiably, yes.
Yeah, I felt betrayed. I did. After all I did, I just felt betrayed.
But one guy who never keeps his mouth shut jumped up immediately and said, "That's not Derek."
Willie T. Yeah. He's an amazing guy. Yeah. And I mean, I've been around a lot of his friends for all these years. He was the guy that introduced me to Muhammad Ali. We were in Muhammad Ali's house in 1984. Because, I mean, he knew all these guys.
Yeah.
And you're right, he doesn't keep his mouth shut. Gets himself in trouble. Got me in trouble a few times. But he was absolutely convinced this was not me.
Right.
I didn't say this. And he was prepared to stand up and say he didn't say this. I appreciated that.
And I think he was on a couple of the local stations.
Oh,
saying
yeah.
that.
He jumped on it immediately. Yeah.
Well, I never believed it when I read it. I mean, let's face it. There's sayings in America, like Italians are called dagos.
Yeah.
They don't shoot you for saying it.
Yeah. They might.
Well,
they might.
Now they might.
Yeah.
And
But
the
I mean,
Polish,
you
and
remember
the Chinese.
wops? I mean, Mario was called a wop.
Yeah.
I'm not sure anybody would call him a wop now. They'd be afraid. But I mean, he'll openly tell you there was a normal nickname.
Yeah. Well.
Krauts,
Yeah.
Dagos, Paddies.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, should we be offended by that now? If we're offended, are we the ones at fault? Come on, get a life.
Yeah. Well, I the minute I heard it, I didn't believe it. It just struck me as completely wrong, and I know I've tried to get you here a few times, and you've been on the road and busy, and you couldn't make it, but I appreciate you taking the time to come here and say what
But
happened.
here's the interesting thing. 35 years ago when I said that, I was never taken to task. I was not scolded by anybody professionally. I was friends with a lot of the Colts football players at the time. They were working out, black guys who heard me say it. All it was, did you hear what he said? It wasn't a racial slur back then. So to reach back and put 2018 standards on a 1983 interview was even more ridiculous. And then to think that my television broadcasting career started at that same time, it sort of builds into the stupidity of this whole thing.
Well, I have a feeling that when all is said and done, and it might be 6 months or a year, you'll come out standing bright and shining.
Well, we'll see. I am 25,000 words into a new book centered around this whole issue.
Really?
Yeah. The title of the book will be Race to Judgment.
Wow.
Think about the connotations.
Yeah.
The business that we're in, race, the Willie T. Ribs, etc., and the desperate race to judgment to get the headlines. There's some great connections, and I find it, I don't want to say a therapy, but it's almost a therapy to put it all down and unfold how something like this can happen and the devastating effects, because ultimately the N-word today it's a much more serious word today. It is a racial slur in any way you use it. However, there is a certain sect of people who use it regularly. There are entertainers, rap singers who use it all the time. So the question comes up, are there double standards here? Probably. Do we want double standards? Probably not. If we were to heal this great divide, with what happened to me, did it help heal it, or did it further divide it? And that's a really interesting question that I'm beginning to unfold as I go through the chapters in this book, because we ultimately want to heal the divide, right? I think, in fairness, we do. We all, if we really think we want to heal the divide, we only do that by not creating havoc, particularly with managers who manage with fear and not with facts. Wish TV is managed with fear. The fear that they would be criticized if they didn't whack me with a big hammer for what they think I said. We have to get away from managing through fear, because it creates havoc within these corporations and havoc within families who are on the receiving end. So that's all the interesting stuff that is beginning to unfold in the book that I hope will be out sometime next year. Maybe May.
Really? All right. When the book is done, will you come back and we'll talk about the book, and you can sign and sell some autographs?
Well, of course. I got two big book fans over here, Phyllis and Marty.
You got a lot of fans. I got a whole row of your books in my
Good.
office.
Did you buy them, or did I give them to you free?
Oh, of course I bought them.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Howdy bought them for me.
See, Connor Daly T-shirt down here, look. Yeah, I like that.
I appreciate you taking the time and going over this, because when I called you and said, this is what I want to say, when I want to question, you said, absolutely, be glad to be
Sure,
here.
I have nothing to hide. And I
that.
told the attorneys, I say, you will not find a single person in this city, in this state, or in this country who ever heard me utter that word in the last 35 years. And Connor, of course, was asked about it regularly. And you know what Connor said? Don't you think my dad was the model for how you behave when you're told that that word should never be used again? My dad became the model, and yet he was whacked over the back of the head.
Yeah, that's true. And I'll say it again. In all the years I've known you, and Willie's said, you're right. Never heard you use a cuss word, ever.
There you go.
Thanks for being here.
Might change. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Derek
Enjoy
Daly.
the rest of the show. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. I want to remind you that we're also brought to you by Sam Pierce Chevrolet in Daleville, Indiana. And it's true when you say the best prices in the country are indeed in the country in Daleville. And when you go to Sam Pierce, you will find he doesn't stand behind you. He stands alongside you. Just take I-69 north to exit 234, go east 1 mile, and you will be there. Yes, sir?
Can I say one last thing?
Sure.
If anybody quotes me in 35 years' time, I'm going to come after you, right?
If you want to take a ride and see what these guys love about driving Indy cars, you got to get IndyRacingExperience.com, find a date that works for you, and then sign up. Or you can call the office at 317-243-7171 and talk to Shonda. And when you go online and subscribe to it, put in there SJ1, you get a 50% discount. Is it time to buy insurance for your home, your car, your commercial building? Then do what I've done and a lot of people have done. Call Mike Pardee at VP Insurance. They're located at 5004 West 16th Street in Speedway. Give Mike a call. The number is 317-248-0070. Let him give you a quote. You might be surprised you get better coverage for less money. And if you haven't signed up for the IndyCar Nation, don't hesitate. Sign up. They got great perks all year long at all the race. You get pace car rides, two-seater rides. You can wave the flag for a start of practice. It's a great organization, and if you go online at IndyCarNation.com and in the promo box put Don K, D-O-N-K-A-Y 15 to get a 15% off of the Champion or Legend membership. If you are a vintage car buff, and this weekend they're down at COTA, you need to get the Vintage Racing Quarterly. Go to svra.com and subscribe. It's a fabulous magazine. You'll love it. It's got a lot of stories about cars as a kid you saw. A lot of them are still around and running, actually. As I said, this weekend, the 1st to the 4th, is the 2018 U.S. Vintage National Championships at the Circuit of Americas. The 1st to the 4th. If you're in the Austin or anywhere in the Austin area, be sure and get out there and see. It's a great event. Now, my next two guests are, I think, two of the best race broadcasters. I think the two of them have really clicked. Sitting on the far end is a man who, did anybody read the sports page, the front page of the sports page this weekend about Matt Taylor, who's now the radio voice of the Colts? Did anybody read that? If you've heard, well, yeah. Well, no, you read the wipe in the corner. Anyway, and I do, thank you. Anyway, in there it talked about how Matt Taylor groomed himself for broadcasting by talking into a recorder and calling baseball games and football games. And the first person I thought of was my first guest, who started his career, and he's now the voice of the Indianapolis 500 and the anchor for the IMS Radio Network. Please welcome Mr. Mark Jaynes.
Thanks, Don. Good to be here.
And the young man sitting next to him, I have been chasing for about 3 months, and he finally said, I got to go home or this guy's going to shoot me. He has joined Mark as the racing analyst, and Davey Hamilton was excellent, but the two of you guys really work well. And I got to tell you, I've been around this sport for about 55, 60 years, and I understand what you say. You put it so that people understand what you're saying and what what is happening. And I'm happy you're here tonight. Please welcome the man they call the Viking, Anders Krohn.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Where the heck are you? You're gone all the time. Do you have to wear a name tag when you get home?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I'm never home. No, it's actually nice to be home. I've been home 2 weekends in a row now, so that's kind of strange, yeah.
Huh.
But no, just having fun and waiting for March to come around again.
Well, when Formula One left NBC Sports Network, they said, well, we've got these guys, we got to keep them and put them on the IndyCar. So you kind of said, well, thanks, but we'll call you later. And right away, Mark got on the horn and said, whoa, this is the guy we need, and there you are.
And what a year. I've had so much fun. I mean, I've got to use words like constipated, for goodness sakes.
Really?
On air, like without being slapped across the wrist.
We're not
which is
5
just
minutes into this
fantastic.
show and you bring that up.
I mean,
Good for you.
I've had a ball, absolute ball, and to have fun with Mark and the entire crew has just been a great year. So it's been an unexpected blessing and kind of cool to come back to. They were the guys that gave me my first chance in the radio booth back in Texas 2011 to go up into the booth, and completely out of my element, but so much fun.
And, you started out karting and you won a number of championships, and so you're not unfamiliar with. You came over to America, you got into I think you started out in the Pro Mazda series. It was Star Mazda at the time, I think, and it counted well for yourself. You went into Indy Lights. You understand how to drive the cars, and basically nothing much has changed. I mean, I've talked to guys that drove 40 years ago, and I said, is there any difference when you go into a corner? No, it's what it was. You got to be a little more careful.
Except the only thing is during the course of the year, Mark and the crew have numerous times pointed out just how quickly I ran out of talent. And,
really?
Yeah, in my career, yes, he has pointed that out.
That was Nick and Jake.
Mainly you, driven by you.
Well, one time we got on the plane and he happened to be in the very first seat in the first row, and we said that's better than he ever did as a driver. So he was pretty happy about being in that seat. So, yeah. And whenever we said, we in a lights race we need a caution to bunch things up, we'd say, well, there's a problem because Anders is not running this race. We're probably not going to get a caution. So.
Mark,
all too true.
When I texted you after reading that article, as I told you, the first thing that popped into my mind when I read that was what you have said numerous times, that you practice broadcasting in a basement or in a bedroom or somewhere, and all that effort has now come to what I assume was your goal when you started that.
Yeah, no question. I talked to Matt a couple of times when he first was named the interim lead announcer for the Indianapolis Colts, and told him how happy I was. I've worked with Matt off and on over the last several years doing some of the high school webcasts and whatnot, and he's worked awfully hard, and he's lobbying for this to be a permanent position for him, and I think it would be a great story for the Colts, and for a kid to come from such humble beginnings and work his way up, and they would be able to do for him certainly what Robbie Green and Wally Levitt did for me, and that's make a dream come true.
You and I sat up in grandstands and on top of towers, and I don't know if one time I got up on the signboard in Milwaukee, probably not. I had better sense than that. But I waved at you when you were up there. And, I would listen to how you called what you were seeing. Now, your job was to call what was going on, and my job was to look behind and see if anything happened, so that in case something went wrong, you could pick up on it right away. And I've always thought, and I've told you this, that when things were changing and new lead announcers coming in, you should be there. Obviously, nobody listened to me, which is probably pretty smart. But finally, somebody woke up. What's it like to be called when somebody comes in, oh, this is the voice of the Indianapolis 500?
I've done it for a couple of years now, and it's as humbling as it was the very first time I heard it. I think, as I told you, my very first race at St. Pete, I kept waiting for for Mike or Bob or Paul to come in the booth and say, yeah, you need to wake up from this dream. This is not really happening. So, but they didn't. And then to anchor the 100th 500 was something I'll always cherish. But I learned quickly after the 100th, I couldn't wait for the 101st and so on and so forth. It's not just the responsibility and the privilege, and it is indeed a privilege, but it's an opportunity to work with the best in the business at what they do, including this guy here.
Oh, a slingshot? Yeah.
And that's the last nice thing I say about him.
I hate to tell you this. If you'd have been around 5, 6, 7 years ago when Dave the King Wilson was there, you should have gotten in the production trailer there. Holy smoke. Guys walked out of there to do the program, and they were bleeding. They had been beaten up on each other. So
it got plenty brutal for Anders this year from time to time, for sure.
Though I did manage on several occasions to take hundreds of selfies on Mark's phone.
Don't leave your phone when Anders is around.
I taped up Dave
anywhere.
First's fire suit a number of times, so much so that it just looked like a big black ball of duct tape, so that was wonderful. So, I mean, I got to do my fair share of stuff as well.
It was like adding a child. But we had fun with
that,
it.
yeah.
You know, with your experience as a driver, you are able, in my opinion, because I listened closely, to translate what you see and what's happening. Now, you haven't driven for 4 or 5 years, but nothing's really changed. You have to handle the car in the same way. You go into the corner, you're going in faster, but you still got to go almost the same way you did when you drove it. So that much hasn't changed. But the other thing I like is he doesn't interrupt you. You ask you a question and let you answer the damn thing.
Well, and I did it there, sorry. But we were at Mid-Ohio. It was a practice session. And I'll never forget it. Alexander Rossi came off of the hairpin, and he talked about how the car felt as he was going back down the hill towards 4. And I thought, well, I don't really need to jump in here. I'm going to sit back and listen. And he basically, because it was the helmet cam, he put you in the cockpit with Alexander Rossi, and he described every inch of that racetrack in that race car and what he was feeling and how he was feeling it. And I became a listener, and it was mesmerizing, and it was it's something that I don't think you get just anywhere. And it just reaffirmed the fact, as he already had many, many times earlier that year, that we had made the right decision, because it was really, really good stuff.
And you're following
Wow.
a guy.
Thank you.
And you're following a guy who's no slouch. I mean, Davey Hamilton is not a giveaway program, but he's moved on and is now part of the.
Thank you, Davey.
Yeah, but I think you stepped right in my opinion, and with Mark, asking a question and listening for the answer has made all the difference. I mean, I really am excited to listen and watch your streaming. I'm a little upset, and I've got Steven Stark scheduled to come in. I'm going to find out what's this gold program. Now I got to pay to listen to you? Come on now. When you started racing, was it ever in your mind that, maybe someday I'll be a broadcaster?
I was going to be an IndyCar driver. You kidding me?
Well, okay.
And of course, it didn't quite make it there. Failed pretty hard. Everything fell on its face pretty good. No, it really wasn't. And like I said, I got in the booth in 2011, had some fun, didn't really think anything of it. Then got in the booth at the Baltimore Grand Prix 2013. I was like, hey, this is kind of cool. And then the following year, I was asked to do the Indy Lights broadcast full time, and I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing, but sure, I'll do it. And I didn't realize it's something that I wanted to do until I was actually doing it. And I'm like, oh my God! So I've been a driver, I've been a driver coach, I've been an engineer, and I've always been a fan of racing. And now I get to combine all those elements into telling my story and what I'm seeing out there, and kind of putting myself in the shoe of, well, if I'm the driver coach, what am I looking for? If I'm the driver, what am I looking for? And if I'm a fan, what should I be looking for? So for me, it's a dream job, because it combines everything I've done and just my love for watching race cars go in circles. So it's really kind of perfect.
And you also have a business that you are a co-founder of, and that is called?
Coforce.
And what is Coforce's aim in the world?
World domination. No, it's we're $100 million. No, We're a digital media marketing agency, so we do a lot of video production, public relations, social media, and so on and forth. So we actually get to share the voices of a lot of drivers, teams in racing. We work with a lot of partners in racing, and really our goal, as I was racing, I never felt like I had anything solid to rely on from a marketing background. So that's kind of what we're trying to change. Is we want to enable people to prove more and more value for the partner companies that do take the chance and prove value on the front end, so that companies that haven't been involved in racing feel like, yes, I want to jump into racing. And you see continuously now with as CEOs change, as we saw with Fuzzies, and them pulling out of IndyCar, all it takes is a CEO or a CFO just changing their mentality or philosophy slightly, and then you've lost a sponsor. And it's not because it's a bad product or because IndyCar is bad, it's just different philosophy. And you see that more and more and more now. And so I think you have to be more competitive now than ever at coming up with compelling reasons and a return on investment for people to invest in IndyCar. So you just have to become as well armored as possible from a number of perspectives, whether that's digital, business to business, or whatever. So that's our goal. We're not solely in racing, but that's probably 75% of what we do. And it's such a big challenge. Every single day is a huge challenge, but love every minute of it. And guess what? It ties directly into what we talk about, because I kind of get to have my finger on the pulse. So,
Mark, after following the entire series, what did you think of the series? What do you think of the new cars? What do you think of the whole thing? I mean,
I think there's some challenges to make some adjustments, to perhaps make it a bit more competitive. I think the teams will have a full year of data, which will help them in that regard. I think with anything new, everyone. If Anders and I had a dime for every time someone uttered the word blank sheet of paper, we'd both be filthy rich, because that's what every team was facing literally every weekend. And it was funny because I learned from IndyCar series officials that they approached the teams with the idea of doing away with the morning warm-up on the Sunday of a road and street course race, and giving them that time by extending other sessions throughout the course of that weekend. And then those same drivers, when they didn't have particularly good qualifying effort, would bemoan the fact that the morning warm-up was taken away on race day. So, those were some of the storylines that we followed that we found very, very interesting. And it'll be anxious. I'm anxious to see how well they do once we get to St. Petersburg with a full year and then off-season testing under their belt.
the thing that I found interesting, I'm not a great street and road course fan. I'm sorry. You're from Europe, and that's what you did.
how dare you, Don Kay?
But I have to say, these cars raced better than the previous ones. I mean, there was good, close racing on street and road course. Having said that, the Speedway and at Pocono wasn't that good.
I think that's going to change for next year, and I
Yes.
think a big problem that they had was that they basically used the same tire compound in construction as last year, which obviously had a lot more downforce. So what ended up happening is it was a very load-sensitive tire. So you always needed to have some aero load on the tire to put it into the ground to generate the grip. The problem with this downforce package is you have so little downforce, so when you lose even 5-10% of that, the tire is already sort of on top of the ground, so it can't do any real work. But now when you lose that 5-10% overall downforce, the car's just skating up the track. So I think now what Firestone's done with the new tire construction that they've come up with is they've come up with something that's way less load sensitive. So it basically means when you lose that 10-15%, you're not as affected. Because that was, if you look at Pocono, when you were trying to follow someone, you would get what we call a snap understeer, where you could just put as much wheel lock as you wanted in the middle of the corner and it still wouldn't grip up. But I think now with the tire construction, that'll help a lot. So it should be a much, much better show, and hopefully it's also not 98 degrees during the 500 next year. So,
Well, it's summertime. Well, actually, May is still, the beginning of summer. But when they tested a new tire, and all the guys were really happy with what they saw, but you got to take into account, and I didn't realize this, they had resurfaced the track. How much effect did that have? Because it's still new, so it's still grippy.
well, from what I gather, actually, when they drove on the track, the sealant was reducing the overall grip. So it should be a good thing, yeah, because there was so much oil on top of the surface of the tires, really couldn't get into the. Maybe you've heard something I haven't, so
No.
Take that with a grain of salt. But I think it should be a much better show next year.
Are you happy? I'll start with Mark, because you and I are you're a young boy, from the days when IndyCar was ovals. That was an American series of ovals. Now they only got 5 of them. It seemed to me there's a lot of racetracks. One of our favorite was always Richmond, and
Yeah.
I'd like to see them back at Richmond again.
Well, I think, at some point maybe the market will turn that way a bit in a direction that will make sense for the series to go there. I would suggest that if there's any oval track operators out there considering, rolling out the welcome mat for the IndyCar series, that they spend a few minutes, spend some time with the Bommarito Auto Group and the folks at Gateway. I think if you do that, you'll have and you're willing to be all in. First, you got to find that title sponsor that's willing to be all in that regard. Same way with the commitment that ABC Supplies made at Pocono over the last several years. That's what it takes, is a commitment. There's got to be a strong desire for them to have the series there, and I think if that occurs, the series would be a willing participant. But right now, I think all of the markets that we go to are relatively healthy and strong, and I'm excited to see what. I had a lot of fun watching Alexander Rossi and Tony Kanaan on video go around COTA yesterday, and anxious to see open wheel racing back at Laguna Seca for sure.
Well, when Phoenix backed out, and I understand that, I have several friends that live there, and they said, if you didn't tell us there was a race, we sure as hell never knew it. So I got to think, you got to look to the promoter. You got to promote the race. IndyCar can't do it all.
Yep.
And I sent an email to whom I won't say, but I said, geez Louise, I hope for heaven's sake that you replace Phoenix with another oval. And the response was, look, I'm an oval guy, don't worry. When COTA was announced, I said, gee whiz, where'd they put the oval in that place? I must have missed it. I'm disappointed in the fact that they didn't get one, but I'm told wait until next year. Well, I'm getting old. I can't, too many next years left. You better hurry. What do you look forward to the most? Are you excited to see them at COTA? 'Cause that's a pretty nice track.
Yeah, I think it'll be great, but I just look forward to next year watching a completely different complexion of a championship, because I think there were so many unknowns coming into this year, and we didn't really know who the players are going to be until about halfway through the year, and it was pretty clearly established that it was going to be Scott Dixon versus Alexander Rossi, and then the Penske's trying to chase them down as much as they can. But I think now with a clean slate, I'll be intrigued to see, does someone just have a clean run from beginning to end? And the one person I've got my eye on is obviously Alexander Rossi. I mean, he's so fierce, and you look at that performance at Sonoma that he put together. I mean, it was unbelievable. He went a lap down, then unlapped himself, then drove through the field and finished in the top 5. And if you look at his relative pace, every single track, started at the back at Indy, drove his way through. I mean, Phoenix even drove his way through. I mean, had that crash in pit lane and then came through again. So I mean, I really think even though Scott Dixon's the one that won the championship, I think he's the one with a target on his back. So I think that's the number one thing. Could we see a first runaway champion in many, many years, or will it still be as close as it was this year? And then also, I look forward to watching the rookies. I mean, 4 rookies coming in, and all of them are amazing. So yeah, I think it'll be a great season.
Yeah, well, they come to IndyCar as rookies, but they've got a lot of miles under their belt and a lot of trophies and a lot of podium finishes. So it was just announced today, I think it was today, came out that Sam Schmidt hired somebody to drive Robbie Wicken's car. So, that'll be interesting. In fact, he's on the teleconference tomorrow. They're going to talk to him, Erickson. So that'll be kind of interesting to hear. But Mark, if I remember a lot of our conversations, street and road courses weren't exactly something that we looked forward to, because you get to see a car come by and then it's gone. You sit there and wait for it to come back again. Are you getting a little more acclimated and a little more excited, since now you have a television so you can see everything that's going on?
I quickly adjusted, and I adjust every time I walk out the back of our booth at Long Beach and look at the harbor. I've grown quite fond of that environment. Same thing with St. Petersburg being, in that perch in turn 10 and the harbor there. I just absolutely fell in love with Watkins Glen. I hope someday the planets align. We can go back there on a date that makes sense and that we draw, because I think the IndyCar Series belongs at Watkins Glen. It's a living history museum for motorsports, and I loved every minute there and was sad when that one went away. But, Laguna Seca obviously has history. So, I bought in. The first time we went to Mid-Ohio, as we were driving to the racetrack, I thought, what on earth are we going to – I mean, this is the middle of nowhere. And I was there a day, and I got it. I mean, people find it for sure. And it, too, is a fabulous facility. I enjoyed the days in the quote-unquote IRL when we used to have all those side-by-side, wheel-to-wheel races on the ovals, and had a lot of fun calling them. But I can't say that I enjoy what we do now any less. It's a privilege to be able to do it no matter where we are, for sure.
And I think the interesting thing to me is, although Scott won the championship, he didn't have a cakewalk. Alexander was up there for quite a bit of the time, but there's other guys who were giving them trouble as well, and it wasn't Penske necessarily. So they got a good number of drivers that are and teams that are capable of winning, and I think that to me is what makes IndyCar more fun to watch. In Formula One, there's only 2 or 3 teams that are going to win, and that's it. They're up there, and the rest of them are just filling the field.
Well, and I just saw a video of Marcus Ericsson today doing a quick interview, and he said the one thing he's looking forward to so much about his rookie season in IndyCar next year is he'll have a chance to fight for wins and podiums again. He's been in F1 now for 5 years, and when you get to the racetrack that weekend, I have no shot of winning. I mean, how defeating must that be? And that's the only gripe I've got with IndyCar, and that's one, and that's saying something, because I've got gripes with everything in life. My one gripe with IndyCar is this: make the dampers spec. No one that watches the cars out on track knows what a damper does. No one understands that teams put millions of dollars a year into their own damper programs, and it's something that then only enables the teams with the most financial resources to come to the top year after year. That is my one gripe. And if they could change that and make it a spec damper, that means the Mike Shanks of the world don't have to invest $300,000 for the dampers and then another $300,000 to develop them during the course of the year. It means they can just buy the dampers, $40,000, stick them on, have them overhauled at the weekend, whatever they need to do, but it keeps things reasonable. And you know what? We're not going to lose any bit of the show. In fact, I think it's going to make it better. But that's my one gripe with IndyCar, that it ends there.
The thing I find interesting about Formula One, even the mid-pack runners and beyond, they got budgets of $100, $150, $200 million, and they still can't run up front. And look what some of the teams do in IndyCar with an $8 or $9 million package, and they can be competitive.
Yeah, and I think that's why so many people are looking towards it. I mean, that's why the fields are growing, right? They're not growing by accident. We have bumping at the 500. We have 26, 27 cars at Sonoma, and the fields are going to keep growing. So I think as long as we don't become complacent and we keep pushing to make it more and more competitive and enable more and more team owners to look at it as a valuable property, I think we'll have success for many, many years.
I have something that somebody sent up to me, Mark, and so I shall read it to you.
Okay.
I hope you don't get teary-eyed.
Okay.
Mark, you have always said that the event has to stay front and center and not those reporting it. You have succeeded in that desire, and in a nutshell, it is the key to your success.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Who sent that? Somebody over there. Oh, it was the Observer. Oh my gosh. Do you listen to the broadcast while you're sitting in a corner in your lawn chair?
He used to see me in the turns when I was skinny and had hair, so that's right, when Don wouldn't climb up there. One of the guys you can thank for that in terms of an influence is Bob Jenkins. That was always Bob's philosophy. And if I can hear someday that if I remind someone of another broadcaster, if somebody says Bob Jenkins, I'd be truly humbled for sure.
No question, and he looks the same as he did 20 years ago. He talks the same, but now it's an effort, he says, to walk out to his mailbox to get the mail. I agree with him. unfortunately. What do you look for next year? I understand that the lights. Are you going to be doing lights again?
I have no idea. These
right.
guys need to offer me a job first.
Oh. Oh well, don't worry. I'm not going to audition for it. But I understand that lights are going to pick up. They should pick up 3, maybe 4 cars next year, so to get up maybe in the 10 or 12 bracket. That's good racing. And the thing about it, you say, well, there's only 7 cars. Yeah, but they're all 7 were running together.
Well, and ironically enough, part of the downfall of Indy Lights is how many opportunities there's been in IndyCar. There were 2-3 guys that's been moving up every single year. So I mean, eventually the opportunities are so many in IndyCar that you can't stop yourself from going. So I think they've done a good job now. They've realized that if the budget is 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 million, there's a lot of opportunities in IndyCar for a similar amount for a partial season. But now with them really putting an emphasis on lowering the budgets to 800, 900, it really means that, you can't get anywhere in IndyCar with that amount of money outside of an Indy 500 effort. I know that they're working on the point system as well, so you have to qualify to be an IndyCar more so than ever before. So I think they are making some great moves. And again, hey, here's my one gripe with Indy Lights. Look at this. I'm on gripe control today.
Oh, boy.
So what Indy Lights needs is mandatory pit stops. And,
I've said that before, yeah.
And what they need to do is they just need to have a spec wheel gun, a spec wheel jack, and a maximum of 3 people over the wall. 1 person on each wheel, 1 person on the jack. That way you keep it, without having to increase your crew. But that way you get more relevance in for the drivers. Because, I remember 2013 when Tristan Vautier made his IndyCar debut. Coming down into St. Pete, in stint 1, he was running 3rd or 4th. He's doing his first ever pit stop in an IndyCar race. So I think if you bring that relevance in, that's obviously the benefit that the GP2 has over Indy Lights. Then I think that would help a lot as well in just kind of legitimizing it, especially for people looking from abroad.
What do you think of George Michael Steinbrenner teaming up and bringing his driver, and then they've taken the other driver, Pato O'Ward? I still get to figure out O'Ward. That's Irish. He's a Mexican. I don't quite
It's
get
pretty
that
messed
one.
up, man. So is he.
But, do you think both of them were ready to make the step up?
Yeah, I think so, without a doubt. I think if you look at how much Colton matured over the year, and we documented it during several of the races. Last year he would go P1 in qualifying, and then he would chuck it off the road. And this year, especially during the month of May, I know he didn't have the second half of the year that he wanted, but the month of May was just dominant. He found that beautiful edge of super aggressive while still, conserving a little bit. And Pato O'Ward, he just took no prisoners. So, there's when you win the championship like that in year 1, there's only one place to go, and that's up.
That should be good. I think it'd be interesting that George is teaming up with Harding Racing. That should make a good organization. 2 good young drivers. I think it'd be fun to watch.
Yeah, Mike Harding's quite a story. In what he's accomplished as an owner in a relatively short amount of time in the sport, for sure.
And he's done what a good CEO or president or whatever he is. That you don't have to be a great race driver to have a race team. You have to know how to put the right people in the right place to do the job. And
That's
I think,
right.
In my opinion, that's what Mark Miles has done. Look at the people he's brought in. Holy Toledo. So, and I'm going to question him on that next week. Do you miss driving?
Only about 2-3 times a day.
Oh.
No. No, actually, for the most part, it's only when I get to certain tracks. It's when I get to Mid-Ohio, then I really want to jump. Oh, obviously, Indy goes without saying.
Yeah.
But get to Mid-Ohio. Watkins Glen was another one of those places where immediately when you show up, you're like, man, I really wish I was in the car. But outside of that, I've got so many challenges, and now I don't have to work out, and I get to talk about racing with these guys. So, it's kind of, there's some upside to it as well.
You don't have to work out anymore?
Oh, no, not at all. A lot of bicep curls with drinks, though.
Oh,
that
yeah.
keeps me fit.
Well,
So that's all I need.
That'll do it. Are you doing any driver training, any mentoring?
No, kind of moved away from that, not because I necessarily wanted to, but just because business, as they say, has to happen, and just haven't been able to the last couple of years. But it's still something I love to do, and would love to do more of. Hopefully I can come back to it. Yeah.
Has IndyCar contacted you and say, can you help us? We're looking for a title sponsor. Have they consulted you?
Me? No.
I thought that's
No,
what you do.
they would never do that.
Why?
I don't know. I don't think I'm any good.
Veronica says you do quite well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I paid her to say that.
Yeah, well, obviously. What is the title sponsor going to be, by the way?
I
Do you
don't
guys know?
I haven't heard. I haven't heard anything.
Should I put out a crazy rumor and say that it's Amazon?
That wouldn't surprise me, but why not?
How's that for a rumor? It's out there now. It's happening.
Mark, what do you look forward to most for next year, besides the 500, of course?
Yeah, I just, as you know, this time of year I get involved with the IHSAA and doing state championships, and I kind of put my focus on that. I mean, I keep my eye on what's going on in the off season, but believe it or not, Wally and I are in constant communication about the schedule next year and who we're going to use and when and where, and seeing if that has to be massaged at all. We think, by and large, our crew will be back intact, which I think is one of the things that makes us successful, is that the familiarity that we have with one another. But no, I always, after we clear the holidays, I always get anxious for the season to start, and it's just a simple expectation of the season beginning. I mean, I don't go into it with any preconceived notion, although I'll have to echo what Anders said. I think if Vegas is putting any odds at all on Alexander Rossi to win a championship, that'd be a pretty safe bet for you. I get the feeling that it's next year will be his year. Don't know if it'll result in a second 500 win, but he's, I think, got to be the favorite to win a championship, just based upon everything we've seen in terms of his growth over the past 2 years in the IndyCar series.
And he's changed as a guy. When I've had him here when he first got here, and trying to get him to answer it was a little difficult. He's much more relaxed now and talks better. And I think once the fans realize who and what he is, that he will get a fan base following him. Huge, I do believe. So look forward to that. And I think there's a couple of guys that are going to be tough to compete with, but it's fun. I still enjoy it. I should have retired from this 20 years ago, but I've been doing it close to 60 now, so I figured there's no sense quitting now. And Anders is here, so I got a new young blood I can talk to and learn something from. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here, because I'm sure you're not home all that much. Do you have to get home to get dinner yet, or have you already had?
I think I passed my curfew, so I'm,
boy.
yeah, pretty much hosed now, yeah.
Oh, jeez. Sorry to hear that. All right, and you brought your lovely with you. Did you?
Yep.
Where did she go?
Right back
Oh, there she is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You're behind me. Is he an art lover? Oh, okay.
An art lover?
Well, she's down with the art gallery
Art?
in Speedway.
Well,
Is there something I don't know about you?
a lot of motorsports related art in the basement at our
see.
house. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's all motorsports related
see.
art.
Oh,
Are you sure about that?
I am sure about that. I'm not into the Anders Krohn kind of
It's
art.
not finger paintings.
No,
and-
it's not. No.
Gotcha. Well, I'll have to go to.
But
can you
no, I
invite
take
me
that
down
back.
to your
Yes,
basement, please?
Our
I would like to have a look.
our 3-year-old grandson, he might do some.
Oh, I'm
coloring
sure
if
that's
he-
who
so,
did
yeah,
it.
that's-
Yes, your 3-year-old grandson, definitely not you.
Okay, Wally Levin, our network director, did it.
now listen, I'm just going to give you right now. Next time you talk to Wally and you're discussing your crew for next year, if he brings my name up, tell him no.
Okay, all right.
I don't think you'll have to say anything, but just in case. All right, I'm looking forward to it. I have said this, and you particularly, Mark, hear from me during a race about something, and I think you get two guys do a phenomenal job. I think Mark asks you an intelligent question, then he lets you answer it. That's what I really like, and he'll tell you. He and I used to sit up and scream.
Well, the funny thing is, he'll ask me a professional question, and then I will answer with utter nonsense,
Yeah.
and so he then has to bring me back to balance. So it's actually kind of cool.
He makes all of us sound smart, and for that he's a miracle worker. That's for sure. Because all of us have been here at one time or another. So well done, Anders. Keep up the good work for sure.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and perhaps after some testing goes on before the start of the year, maybe, or whatever, I will call the two of you back again.
Yep.
And I look forward to listening to your calls. I think you guys together are doing a great job.
Thanks, Don.
And Mark,
Appreciate it. Thanks,
as
everybody.
I've said 1,000 times, you're in the right spot where you should be. Mark Jaynes,
Thanks,
Anders
Don.
Krohn.
Thanks, guys.
Next week, as I said, As I said, my guest will be the president and CEO of Hallman and Company, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and IndyCar, Mr. Mark Miles, and the director of marketing and communications for IndyCar and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Mr. C.J. O'Donnell, who incidentally has resigned. He will leave at the end of the year, but he's still active now, and I've got him coming in next week. So until then, we'll be back. I don't know if Janine and Kenny are going to be here. Hopefully they will. You're not going to be here. He's already threatened to leave. Jeff, it's going to be you and I, buddy. Yes, sir. All right. Marty was here. Don't forget, if you want to get down and see that, the 5th of November, the Hoosier short track cars will be on display at the Speedway, so go see Marty to get in. She'll take care of you. Until next week, Don K. saying good night. See you then. I didn't embarrass you, did I? What's that?
Thanks, Don.
That was awesome.
Good stuff as always.
You can keep the observers' comments. Yeah, good. I agree. I enjoy listening to you guys.
Dude, that was awesome. Thank you. Thanks for having me.